So let's jump right into it. So Grant McDonald is a guy that I met very early on in my relationship with Scott McGilvery, Michael Saracini. So I went to a couple of the early events and I met this young guy who I'd heard shadowed Scott looking at properties and, was just very well spoken, but more than that, very hardworking. Every time I met him, he was attentive. He would look at you in the eyes when he talked to you. He would actually listen to what you were saying versus some people that are just waiting their turn to talk, and really got my attention early on. We became good friends working the summit weekends over and over and over. But more than that, I watched him grow, right? And I watched how Grant, over the time, started implementing the things he was being taught. And that's why I asked him to come on today, because, learning from a guy like Scott McGilvery, creating his own recipe from what he learned from Scott and going down his own path, all while going back to the well, learning from all kinds of different mentors and people, incorporating that into his own journey. He's a guy that actually executes. And I think there's nothing more exciting than giving somebody a set of tools and seeing them work with it. He's more than just an investor, more than just a renovator. He does amazing fishing and hunting trips and all kinds of other stuff too. He is like deep rooted in the Elgin territory and one of the most stand-up guys I know. So Grant, you want to unmute yourself and say hi to the audience?
Yeah, good morning, guys.
Awesome. So where are you currently located right now and what's going on in Grant's world?
So like as of this exact moment, I actually just moved out to a farm. Yeah, I love the outdoors, love the acreage. Again, going back to kind of the investor routes and exactly what I was taught and all along was, and a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but your home is not an asset. Your own principal residence, albeit that's what you're taught all along. Having a ton of equity tied up in your own principal residence is not getting you the best return on investment. So early on, a bunch of my mentors always preached the whole aspect of use your capital, invest in income producing assets. In the interim, have that cash flow come and pay for your rent that's elsewhere. So I'm giving that a go as I just sold one of my homes that I was living in, and so far so good. So
that's awesome. And so
yeah.
let's expand on that for a quick second, because I think when our parents grew up, interest rates were like 15, 16%, right? So for them, it made a lot more sense to save your money because you're getting paid by the bank quite a bit of money to actually have your money in the bank. And, owning a home, you're paying a lot of interest. So for them, it was like, just get that mortgage paid off as quick as you can. How do you think we're positioned today differently from maybe our parents' generation?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, we're basically seeing the cheapest money ever. In some aspects, money is free. I mean, the big banks are certainly kind of throwing it out there in terms of mortgage opportunities. So I don't want what I said earlier to be taken out of context and saying, don't buy real estate. I mean, certainly, take advantage of this if you can get lending or if you can get mortgages from the banks. Just from a numbers perspective, though, I mean, to put it in an income producing asset is going to be your best bet. And that's, again, it's all about the teachings. It's all about the numbers too. And I'd say that's probably the most important lesson from someone, especially if you're just starting out in real estate investing, is the markets are crazy right now. No matter where you're looking, it could be London, it could be Toronto, it could be, the smallest little town that you've never heard of. We're seeing all-time prices there. And I would say from an investor's perspective is you need to stick to the numbers though, and don't get too emotional or don't get too excited in terms of buying as much property as possible, because you don't want to buy based on speculation, right? And I think that's important to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at properties. And and I catch myself too thinking, well, this just appreciated by 20% in the past year or whatever it may be. But it is important to make sure you put pen to paper and keep calculating and make sure that you're not going to get yourself in trouble based on speculation, and buy based on the real numbers that you're seeing.
Well, you're a practical and tactical dude. So let's give people some things to actually take notes on. So when you're running your pro formas, like I'm running 3 to 5% on my projected passive appreciation, more based on a little bit higher than inflation. What are you doing when you're analyzing deals?
I'm doing the same thing. Yeah, I would rather be as conservative as possible. And then in the event that the property outperforms those numbers, well, that's great. I mean, you just made more money, right? So on the flip side, how people can get themselves into trouble is, they say, well, hey, maybe the repairs and maintenance won't be that much, or, snow removal, I'll do that myself. And they start to kind of fudge the numbers and cheat the system a little bit. And they say, hey, we just saw 12% appreciation. I'm going to plug that in. So that's what starts to happen is you'll start to overpromise and underdeliver. Whereas from the flip side, if you can just stay as conservative as possible, I mean, we've had double-digit returns for the past few years in the markets that we're buying in. I'm still saying 3 or 5% appreciation, and if we see 8 or 12%, well, that's certainly a bonus, right? But I'd rather be conservative.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you know our approach, right? We're like overly conservative because let's pretend to that, you know, act in the worst of times, but be prepared to work in the best of times. And
Right.
you're working with that house money, you know, assume things can change because I don't think people realize that. Like in real estate, a light switch can go off, right? Next week, all of this can change. Consumer confidence can change because of, you know, I remember it was a year and a half ago. For some reason, the luxury market was at a standstill. The
Mhm.
narrative amongst buyers and realtors and builders was product's not moving, right? And that trickles down the whole confidence meter, and it goes down to the consumer level, and then they're a little bit more gun shy. Now stuff that wasn't selling for, you know, a 900,000 is selling for 1.5 million
Right.
literally a year later, right? And it's, you know, there are a lot of emotions involved in real estate, you know, investing and purchasing. And I think the audience that we're speaking to, they're all real estate investors in their own right, regardless of if they're using it as a primary revenue or wealth building tool, or, you know, buying their primary assets and understanding the nature of the asset that they own. So let's go back to the beginning and kind of walk through that journey, because I think that'll give a ton of value to the people that are listening. When you got started, what was the inception of your interest in real estate? Because I don't think I've ever asked you that question.
Um, I would have to say one of the kind of one of the earlier inspirations was when I went to university. First year was in residence, but second year, myself and four of my roommates, it was time to look for a place to live. So we did our apartment search. We found a place, and we all sat down at a table. And suddenly, five guys writing out 12 post-dated checks was certainly an aha moment for me. You start to add up the numbers, and we lived in that same place for the following 3 years. So certainly when you do the math, I was sitting there thinking this landlord's making out okay, albeit real estate's expensive in the market that we were living in and such. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to be able to get into a rental property where, again, you have some tenants and you've got people that are, at least helping you pay down that mortgage for long-term gain. So it certainly wasn't kind of a get rich quick idea. It was more so, this would be a great way to set myself up for retirement down the road in terms of, having a few properties, diversify the portfolio. Again, don't throw all your eggs in one basket in real estate, but certainly for the people that I've met that if I bought properties and income properties, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they're certainly thankful that they did. So that was kind of my thought process, was if I can pick up one or two, then the future generations will probably be grateful for it. So
And then did you figure out kind of the magic of real estate from the jump in terms of, you know, somebody paying down your mortgage and the passive appreciation, all those things? Or did you just see a ripple in the curtain and you're like, I want to go through this and explore this more?
a little bit of both. I finished university and I started working a desk job. It was a Monday to Friday. It was a great job, salary, so it was comfortable. Um, but I knew that there could be something more, and I was always of that mindset of have a second or third source of income coming in, because that again, it certainly makes changes down the road. So early on after graduation, once I had that income to be able to help me kind of pursue the property. Um, that was kind of my goal, was, hey, if I can pick up a rental property, keep working my job, but have a little bit of extra cash flow come in maybe on a monthly basis, that'd be pretty cool. So I was able to buy my first property, renovated it, was able to rent it out. And then you start to see some of that cash flow come in. And then you start to do the math in your head thinking, well, hey, if I had 5 or 10 more of these, um, I mean, bigger the better, right? So that was kind of the mindset. But I also found that once I had that one property and I did the renovations and I loved that aspect of it, when I was sitting in my desk job all day, I was thinking about getting home to be able to continue the renovations, or what I was going to do that weekend with the project. So again, that was part of my shift in terms of, if I could focus on these renovations and focus on these projects full time, um, that'd be a heck of a lot more fun. So,
So what were you doing in your job, and what was the very first property that you purchased?
yeah, so the job was, so I went to university for business. So I was working actually in the solar industry. I had kind of a business development marketing role. So very, especially at the time, it was a very interesting industry. It was in the midst of the big boom. We were going to conferences and a whole bunch of fun stuff that was going on. But as most of you know, in Ontario at least, that whole industry was driven by the government at the time. So it was a government subsidy, it was a feed-in tariff program. That being said, those businesses are very volatile. It's a very volatile industry because, solar comes and goes, and as of right now, it's affordable if there's a subsidy to help pay for it. So kind of I could kind of see it in the horizon that there was going to be some volatile, like a bit of a volatile market there. So I knew that that wasn't going to be kind of a permanent role. So that was again a little bit of motivation to think of, okay, well, what else can I work on? What can I have kind of going on the side for me? So my first property was a duplex. It was a full gut job. It needed some work, but back then, I don't want to say back then, but it was market was a heck of a lot cheaper too. So
What year was it?
that would have been 2014.
Okay. Was that courthouse?
No, this is actually up in Peterborough.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
Okay. So that's super interesting. Didn't know that. And,
yeah.
you went to a full gut job out of the gate. So education wise, did you look at how to analyze a deal prior? Was it just a deal that you found and you're like, hey, this seems like a great property. I'll buy it. I'll renovate and I'll rent it. Like, what was your approach in understanding how you were going to execute on the opportunity?
Yeah, this one happened to be an off-market property. I've got family that live up in the area, and it was a friend of a friend kind of deal where they were thinking about moving that property. So I bought that with the intention on being a rental property, and that's what it was. In terms of the renovation standpoint, I guess I was fortunate in being around renovations for a good portion of my life. My father was always working on different projects and property and stuff like that. So I wasn't afraid to get my hands dirty. And again, that aspect always interested me. So I had the truck and I had the tools pretty well already. And I thought I could get my hands dirty. And fresh out of university with just a full-time job, then I had a ton more energy to be able to work the long nights and the full weekends and do all of that. So it was a learning experience. Don't get me wrong. But I think the main lesson there is, for the parts that you're not sure of, be sure to hire a pro. So I was able to bring in an electrician, a plumber, and the guys that need the proper licenses for sure.
Oh, that's super interesting. So let's dig into that. So what went right and what went wrong with that investment?
I wouldn't say much went wrong. Obviously, you get budget creep, you get scope creep, right? I mean, a little job that you think, hey, that'll take tomorrow afternoon takes 3 days. So stuff like that happens. In terms of budget, again, it's a renovation, right? I mean, you never really know, especially with an older home. This one was over 100-year-old home. So once you start to pull back the old lath and plaster, it always opens up a can of worms, right? So it's as many times as I've done this, and we've done many projects in big or small scale. It's still impossible to really focus in on a true budget because stuff happens,
Yeah,
right?
and I
So
think it's a great takeaway actually when people are taking notes to understand you can analyze a deal left, right, and sideways. It comes with an inherent amount of risk. And if
yeah,
you're waiting for somebody to tell you that, you've got every single angle covered, just don't real estate invest, right? Because you're not going to be able to control all the mitigating factors, the market, the trades, the timelines, the budgets. You'll have a certain amount of confidence that you can build into the project and understand. And I think that goes back to being conservative in your analysis of the deal. So you have that baked in. So you're not just looking for a unicorn, or hitting a home run every time. You're hitting doubles and triples and getting on base. Just for context about how many projects or how many properties are you currently, have you done or do you hold?
um, yeah, I try to kind of stray away from specific numbers or anything, but we've done dozens of projects and have dozens of properties that we're currently managing, and yeah, it's busy, and it's interesting, right? Because we see these market fluctuations, and
Yeah.
a few years ago, it was very much of the mindset of let's accumulate as much as possible. The time is right, and I mean, Justin, you and I have been talking and preaching about the London St. Thomas market for many years, especially before things started getting crazy. Um, because I mean, it was a sign of things to come. I mean, we were seeing Toronto continue to grow and expand, and then you started to see the ripple effect in Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge, down to Hamilton area, and then you think of, well, where can you go next? And it's really beyond Woodstock. It's you get into London, which is a powerhouse. It's a massive city. So that was kind of my mindset over the past, several years of doing what I'm doing was, accumulate a portfolio of properties, because things are going to get better and things are going to get busier. And I'm thankful that I have. But I mean, it's interesting now. The way the market is you really have to start to adapt.
Yeah.
We're not seeing the price points. We're seeing people, especially in my markets, people are overpaying by 20, 30, 40% on a property where there's no way that it's ever going to cash flow based on what you're buying it on. So,
Mhm.
so it's interesting in terms of, you do need to kind of be agile and be able to adapt. And that's something we're working on right now. And I was working with Jamie in your office,
For sure.
looking at a property and running numbers based on, well, what's it going to be worth, and based on as is values. And again, you kind of have to stay true to the numbers. You can't get too hyped up. So,
Jamie's the perfect guy to mention that too, right? In terms of like
mhm.
talk about an analytical MBA from Ivy, like super, super
Yeah.
smart. And I'm kind of the opposite where, I'm a dreamer, I'm the marketing and sales guy. So there's a bit of a balance in between of like, okay, what can you do with this? Here's a conservative ballpark of, what the math looks like on the property. But as you well know, real estate is art and math, right? And
Yeah.
it's the craziest thing. I was talking to one of our mutual friends yesterday about this, put an offer on a property, and we are talking about like just a little bit of a difference, well, a significant difference for some people on the price point that he was willing to close at. And I looked at a deal that I did with him 4 years ago, and I told him not to buy it. I'm like, yeah, you're probably paying 40 grand more than you should for this property now, but this is going to establish the comp for the next 6 that you do in this area. So it's kind of a win-win. Like if you get it, you get it. If you don't, the new price, that's the new price, right?
Mhm.
Comparable sales, something's not worth it until it is. And then that's the historical value and the historical comp, like the price that you just said for the last property that you would have sold on that street. That's now the comp. So every other
Right.
house that's going to be compared against it, that's the comparable value. The tricky part that you're talking about that I would love the audience to write down is still looking at your numbers though. Like, cause if you're looking at it strictly from an investment perspective with lending rates and everything else, if you're not looking at it with rose colored glasses and the math doesn't work, the math simply doesn't work. And you don't have to get emotional about it because you just need to get something under contract right away. Sometimes it is just putting in the reps, writing offers that make sense and losing 5 or 6 or 7 of them. And then you get the one that makes sense. You feel good about it and you're not staying up late at night trying to just
Right.
make it work or hitting it from the right angle. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And and again, this is, what I'm saying is all taught to me, right? It's from a lot of my mentors throughout the years. But I mean, if you want to grow a scalable business, you need to be making money. You need to be buying profitable cash flowing properties. So I think it depends on where you are in your stage of business or investing in real estate. But certainly if you're starting out, I mean, cash flow is the fuel for that car. I mean, if you want to be able to drive it, you need to be able to fuel it. So that's certainly number one priority. So there are still markets where we're getting cash flow, but it's not going to be the big cities, the kind of the popular areas that you're hearing about. It might be the half an hour north or south or east or west, maybe a little bit more in the boonies, but you're still going to be able to find some lower price properties that are getting decent rents. So that might be, again, when you talk about shifting your focus, that's going to be maybe where you're going to be looking. Instead of London, you're looking out in Dutton, or maybe like Lindsay's area, right, where you're still getting less of a purchase price, decent rents, and all the eyes from the big city, the GTA, haven't gone out there yet. So that's certainly one aspect of it. Um, yeah, this market's always fluctuating, right? It changes, and I think that's what excites me so much about it. Is there's so many opportunities, but again, it's you can't just kind of put your feet down and focus and say, hey, this is where I am. It has to fit my model or not, because this market is driven by so many factors, right? I mean, we're seeing with the low interest rates, we're seeing with the influx of people, especially from the GTA, now that people are working from home, right? We've got a global pandemic happening, which again is shifting people's buying behaviors, it's shifting what they're looking for. So there's stuff that is changing every single day, and you certainly just need to be able to adapt for sure.
Yeah, and the last guy we had on the podcast, his buddy of yours, Scott McGilvery, said the
Hmm.
exact same thing, right? And I've always looked at him as somebody that is a bit of a maverick in his space, where he was kind of doing it before anybody was. And he said the exact same thing you just said. So we're getting 2 episodes back to back where he's like, don't get stuck just looking at the places that everybody else are playing in. Look at the secondary, look at the tertiary markets. What are the products nobody's buying? Right? He's looking at hospitality when everybody's selling hospitality. He's like, well, that's interesting. Like, if nobody's competing for that product, let's run
Yeah.
some analysis on that product and see how it might work. Reminds me of the conversation we had when we were booking, actually this podcast we were talking about a month ago. And the farmhouse that you're in right now, we were looking at a way of, maybe looking at your primary residence as a potential income producing asset if you're doing it with a certain lens, right? And
Yes.
looking at, capital gains on or personal investments versus the ones that are strictly your business investments, and tax implications and whatnot too. So I guess that leads into my next question that I had for you. If you were coaching yourself, right? You went back to the beginning now, what are some lessons you would teach yourself? Even though you had such amazing mentors, I'm sure there's certain things that would speak to you specifically of, hey, Grant, do this a little bit quicker, or maybe don't do this. What are some things that kind of trigger in your mind when I ask you that question?
Yeah. It's funny because I think of this all the time, and I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine yesterday about that exact question. And in all transparency, if I were to do it again, I would have been able to, or at least learn to delegate sooner, better, and faster. Justin, you and I have had conversations about this, throughout the years, and I still stand to that. I'm kind of a one-man show, but I mean, with that, there are so many inefficiencies. There's so many delays. Looking back, I spent a lot of time kind of caught in the weeds dealing with admin type work and some of the kind of the back end stuff instead of focusing on, what my time would have been better spent on, which is continuing to grow the portfolio, analyzing deals, putting out offers. And a lot of times I just get into the mindset where, I've got a lot on my plate. That looks like a good deal, but I can't do it right now. 4 years later, when we've seen the property appreciate by, 40, 50%, I think, holy crap, what have I done? Right. So that was, looking back, that's absolutely what I would do differently is delegate. I'm a bit of a control freak, and I kind of have been from the start. Be able to kind of give up a little bit of that, ask for help, bring in extra people. And with that, it just makes you stronger. Right. So I've seen your team, just continue to grow and multiply. And with that becomes, it's a power team, right? You've got so many different talents. You've got so many different areas. You've got so many markets that you're covering. And with that, you all get better together, right? So that's certainly a big learning lesson that I've had.
Yeah, I think a big part of it's just the culture of people around you, right? We've always maintained such a good relationship because never in our conversations did I ever feel like, you were coming to me just because you wanted something, and vice versa. It was always, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. What's working for you? What's working for me? And, same with the team and the environment. I always say, try to grow within the means of where you can provide value and service. Don't just grow for the sake of growing because, you want the Instagram photos or you want the numbers and say, I do this and I'm the number one person that does that. I think, if you're doing it with integrity, it has a big part of the foundation of your business. And I've always respected that about you, is the integrity in the work that you do. The time that you would take early on to go to the municipality and work hand in hand with the city for the things that you wanted to execute on to develop those relationships. Again, I want to keep this hyper practical and tactical because you're such a valuable person to have on the podcast. As you were going into markets and doing things and dealing with the city and developing those relationships, what was something that you would give a newer investor in terms of tips that, they're scared to call and ask about a zoning change, or scared to develop a relationship with a planner or a municipal hall? Like, what does your relationship with the municipalities look like now versus the beginning?
Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, it all comes down to the old golden rule that we were taught probably in preschool is, treat others how you want to be treated. And I think a lot of people within, city or council roles, or, inspectors, or, in the planning officials, I mean, I think they take a lot of flack from a lot of people, which understandably so. There's some frustrations, there's delays, and certain,
Red tape and everything else, right?
certain red tape can cost a lot of money. So I know it can be a high stress job. And we've been there too with projects where, I mean, again, stuff happens. There's unexpecteds. But at the end of the day, they're just doing their job. Right. So, and I think that's kind of what you need to focus on is, they've got a certain book of rules and they're trying to follow that. And so am I, and we're all trying to get stuff done together. So that's kind of the approach that I've always taken. And again, I've focused primarily in kind of the smaller towns too, where, maybe these people are a little bit more approachable than dealing with, the city of Toronto per se. But that's kind of my approach is, hey, they're just people, they're doing their job. Let's all get along. Let's work together. And I think that's been the best part. I mean, we've gotten to know the inspectors really well, and it's, they know the quality work that we do, and I understand them and kind of their approach as well. But at the end of the day, let's just get this done together. right?
Yeah, and
So
I
they
think a
might have
super
some,
hack for anybody watching is just that, right? Understand that that person sitting on the other side of the desk is a person that's doing a job, right? And I know there can be frustrations when you have money sunk into a project, things happen, permits aren't getting issued and whatnot. Trust me, I can definitely understand
yeah,
both sides of it because I work with many municipalities. But once you've established those relationships and you've proven yourself to them, the dynamic does change, right? When they understand the quality of work that you do, the diligence that you do on your projects, that you're not just coming in blind and trying to just do something and have never done it before, that's where they get a little bit ornery and things can take a little bit longer. Versus, I mean, again, hiring a proper person to go in and execute. I was looking at a project with the team recently, and we just recommended they have a planner, have a conversation with the city because that planner is or the planners used to be involved with the municipality and
hmm,
understands their language, right? And, I defer to people like you. Like, I've never hunted. If I want to go bow hunting, I'm going to go, hey, Grant, can you take me out and show me like the language and the etiquette? I don't know how to do it, right?
yeah,
It's the same thing in all aspects of life. I think using a good community of people that are doing good work makes a big, big difference.
that's it. Yeah.
So where's your investing mindset today in terms of the types of projects that you're tackling? So you're calling Justin saying, hey, find me an off-market deal. What can I find, Grant, today?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? So as you kind of grow in the market and the ebbs and flows, and I mean, I was of the mindset of, buy as much as possible the past several years. And then a point in time went on where, we had so many projects on the go. It was busy, it was chaos. My phone's ringing every 5 minutes. Um, and then I kind of had that aha moment, or that kind of realization, I guess, that holy crap, this has turned into a job. This is now turning into work, and it was actually starting to pull a little bit of the fun and passion out of it. I mean, I entered this industry because I love property, I love buildings, I love old homes and Victorians, and the whole process of making something old and new again. um, and I think that's kind of 2021 and onward, I want to be able to kind of focus on that and make sure that that passion stays ignited, right? Make sure I'm focusing on projects that I'm excited about. I'm not just buying it because, well, hey, it makes some money, or hey, this one makes sense. I want to kind of focus on stuff that gets me excited to get out of bed in the morning, and work on it, right, and kind of follow that transformation. So that would be one in terms of, and that's more so kind of from a flipping perspective, I would say, is finding those projects, those real kind of gems of a project that are in those markets where, again, you get excited. The
Oh,
ones that I
man,
send over to you and you go, oh yeah,
for
let's
sure.
get that one, right? So
I see the trim work behind you. I remember our last conversation. That leads right into the next thing I was going to say about the Renovator of the Year award at the LHBA. Like, that is something I want to talk about. But that project is exactly that, right? Because you can just do volume and you can bang out a whole bunch of projects, make a whole pile of
yeah,
money. But if you're not having fun doing it, what's the point, right?
exactly.
Truthfully, because I mean, we can go work 75 hours at a job to like just keep piling up cash and piling up cash. And then 25, 30 years goes by and you look back and you're like, what did I leave in my wake? Right? I'm sure the LHBA award and that project specifically has a special place in your heart. So do you want to expand on that process, how you found the project and what that meant to you?
Yeah. So I mean, how I found that one was kind of an interesting story, but it's all connections. It's all kind of who you know, and working with realtors, and I mean, you guys are such a huge asset, right? I mean, it's the connections, it's the knowing kind of what we're looking for. So it was kind of a realtor that has known a realtor that had a friend that was thinking about selling, and it all kind of worked out for that specific project. But again, I love the old homes. I mean, I've got colleagues who can make, they make a heck of a lot more money, they do a heck of a lot more projects, and they like to do like the 1980s bungalows, duplex conversions and stuff like that, which, I mean, all the power to them. And you know what, they've, monetarily they've done a heck of a lot better than I have. But I like finding those real decrepit mid 1800s. They need a heck of a lot of work, they
So
need a
what
ton of
was it?
money
Like,
thrown
what
into
was
them.
the house? How many square feet was it? What style of home was it? And what type of condition was it in?
Style was it was an old farmhouse. The original farmhouse kind of within the area that it was in. Beautiful area. It's since been developed, but it was developed kind of throughout um, the mid kind of 1900s. But that's the street where the doctors and lawyers and everyone live. But this was the old original farmhouse that used to be on that plot of land. So condition, it was rough. we yeah, we could have had we wore masks going through one of the first times, so it needed a lot of work. most of the places we take are pretty well gut jobs, because again, from a numbers perspective, but also from a renovation perspective, I want to make sure I know what's behind the walls and that things are done properly. So especially if it's a deal where we're going to be putting back on the market, I don't want there to be any unknowns, right? So I like the confidence of, if we can strip it right back and we need to do a lot of the reframing and structural work and electrical and plumbing and HVAC and new installation, the buyers have a confidence as well, knowing that, hey, this is one of Grant's projects, it's done properly. Here's the list of the trades that have done every component. It's all up to new building code. It just gives them a ton more confidence. So again, I know there's more efficient and more cost-effective ways to do a lot of these projects in what I'm doing. But again, a lot of it goes back to that passion. And I think that's an important aspect of it too, is, you don't want to get into an industry just because of the dollars and cents. I mean, it's great if you can make some money while you're doing it. But at the end of the day, if I weren't passionate about real estate and design and renovation, I probably wouldn't be as excited about what I'm doing, because, some of that stuff gets old. And as you said, you can just go work 70 hours a week, get another job too, if it's just about the money. So I think the passion aspect of it is very important. It's, the numbers got to make sense, but at the same time, you want to be excited about it, right? You want to take pictures of it. You want to show your friends and bring people through for a tour. I mean, that's kind of the fun stuff too, right?
Oh, 100%. I was actually, as you're talking, scanning your Instagram and trying to pull up a photo of the property itself. Do you have it posted anywhere that I can send people to go see it?
Yeah, probably on Instagram. It'd be a ways back for the Ontario Homebuilders Award one. That was a project that we did. I got that award in 2019. So
Okay.
you'd be scrolling a ways back, but
Well, I'll
again,
find
an
it.
old home, and we were able to preserve some of the character in the home, which is again that's my favorite aspect of it. Right. I mean, you could totally just gut it right to the studs and not save anything, but then ultimately it just looks like a new home. So what we
Yeah.
try to do in every project is make sure that if there's kind of a key component or something that you like, or a focal point in that home that has some charm and character, try to keep it. Right. So that's what we were able to do with this place. Was it had the original brick fireplace in there. So we preserved that, and we kind of built things and played with the layout around that fireplace to kind of make it work. And it was, again, a talking point. Anyone that walked through, they said, "Oh my gosh, look at that old brick."
Yeah.
So it's little things like that.
I think people, they'll look at the kitchens, the bathrooms, like the typical renovations that everybody does, and they overlook those things from a real estate agent's perspective. People will overpay for stuff like that when they walk into a property, because
Yeah.
they value the character and the charm. And there is something to be said about people that are preserving old things. As you're talking again, you remind me of my father-in-law, Larry Grogan, from Grogan Ford, and he's got
Yes.
classic cars, and he's got these resto mods that he's doing where they're taking classic cars. They're literally giving them all of the new components, so new brake systems, electronics, so that you can literally drive these cars to Florida. But
Yeah.
he keeps the integrity of the cars, the original paint color, all of the original instrumentation and everything else, so that it feels like, you're respecting the original designers and the artists that created these properties, or sorry, these cars. And it's the same thing with you in the properties, right? You walk in and you see the wraparound porch, you notice the millwork, you start seeing, the story behind the property. That fires
Right.
me up. Same thing. Like, I could just go out and try and blow out as much volume as I can when I work on exceptional properties. You know me well. I get pretty excited and I get
Yeah. Oh yeah.
fired up to talk about the story of the property. Somebody's going to buy it, so the sale's going to happen. But it's more like, man, who built this? How did he go about doing it? Like, he went to an area before there was a Home Depot. So how did he get his materials up here? Like, where was the inspiration for the
Right.
design, and how did he execute the project? Right. So you're bringing in your own touch to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think especially that's exactly it. And you would agree with this from a real estate perspective or a realtor perspective, is um, everyone loves, not everyone, I won't generalize that, but for the most part, it's very trendy. People love old homes, the character and, some of those aspects to it. Um, but as you start walking through, there's a lot of red flags as you're walking through an old home. Ooh, what about the furnace? How's this insulated? What about those old windows? So I think that's kind of an interesting niche. And I think that's kind of a win-win, is if you can have a new home, but it's old, or flip that around, it's an old home, but it's new. It gives those buyers confidence in that, they're essentially getting into a new home. All the components, the mechanicals, the electrical, everything is safe. It's to code. It's new. It's efficient. Um, but you've got that character, which is one of a kind, right? I mean, this is an 1860 farmhouse, and there's some really quirky little aspects and certain trim detail where you would never see in a new build ever. But I think that's what's really neat about it is, it's unique. And I think that's what people, especially people that are buying their, whether it's their forever home or a family home, is, they want that pride of ownership. They want to feel comfortable in it, but they also want a place where, you know, once we can start having friends and family back over and guests, I mean, they want to have that place where they bring people through and they think, oh, this is really cute, or wow, look at that cool detail. So I think that's kind of the fun part about it is, find something old, make it new again. And again, from a renovation perspective, it's, kind of makes you feel proud knowing that that house is now going to be standing for another 100 years, right? So that's kind of the neat part.
I want to find you like every farmhouse that it needs to be severed into its own property and just move you from farmhouse to farmhouse. Just have you
Bring them over. Yeah.
revitalize the area. I think that's such a cool niche. And again, we just coined a new term in real estate. You're resto modding houses. Essentially, take that from the auto industry.
That's it.
Over. No, that's awesome, brother. I definitely, over the time watching grow in the implementation. So that's again one of the main focuses of what I wanted to talk about with you is. So, you're implementing these different strategies that you're learning. How do you implement them without getting overwhelmed, right? Because early on in your career, you're getting thrown all these ideas by all these different mentors. You're seeing all kinds of investors doing so many different things. How do you just pick one and implement it versus, trying to take and execute 17 ideas at the same time?
That's tough. It's interesting, right? And I mean, there's so many different avenues that you can go down, especially in real estate. I mean, you can go be a realtor, you can be, you can focus on the flips, you can focus on the multifamily or focus on the really big multifamily. Or I've got a lot of colleagues that are just, they love the idea of just doing the private lending because it's consistent. It's a really good return on your investment, but it's also, again, secured on real estate. So, I mean, there's so many different avenues that you can go down. But I think the biggest kind of learnings and lessons or teachings that I received was, well, focus on what your strengths are. Right. And that's a conversation you and I have had over the years too. And personally, I mean, I've always loved the design aspect of it. Growing up in a family where, my mom had HGTV on every single night, right? That was just kind of the norm. You walk past the TV and, Scott McGilvery's on there or, whoever it may be. So I love that aspect of it. But, diving into that even more, my favorite part on all those shows were the transformation. At the very end when they finally reveal the final product and they show you the before and then the after, right? I mean, that was my favorite part. So from a real estate investing perspective, well, what do you want to do? Again, I could have focused on just, trying to source out the really big multifamily properties, which I'm always looking. So if you see more of those, send them my way. But from an excitement perspective or a passion standpoint, for me, it's, I want to find those kind of diamonds in the rough. I want to find those places where you can do that drastic transformation.
Love it. And, I think, again, you started just delineating 5 or 6 different things that people are doing in their aspects. You got to do what speaks to you. Yeah. Right. The private lending, it doesn't speak to me. It's just not what I do. Right. My business is a cash flowing asset. That's how I look at what I do in the business world and my investments. I want ultra passive things that I don't have to touch at all. And that's what we do because again, I love what I do and it takes all my focus to do what we're doing in the media world. And then in the real estate world as well too. So, you're a constant anchor in our lives anyways. And I know the conversations that I have with the team, whether it be Nathan or Jamie or Lindsay and the other people that we're all kind of just coming back to the well, sharing, and then going back out into the wilderness. I think having people like you around us gives us that settling point and looking for people in your community that's like, okay, yeah, no, they're still going. Okay, that's going to inspire me to grow right. And that's going to inspire me to get to that next stage, versus other people where you see there's a constant influx or inconsistency that you want to kind of stay away from. Who are your anchors? Who are people that you look to drive? Like when you're tired and you're sitting down, you're like, maybe I'll just quit. That you're going to think and be like, you know what? No, like, they're growing, they're adapting. I want to get this as well too.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And you know what? I've never truly appreciated until this pandemic. Suddenly you're locked at home. You're kind of quarantined away from your colleagues. I mean, Justin, normally you and I would be, up in Niagara this weekend and planning big dinners and hanging out with, a few hundred other investors and doing those types of things where, you really took those social aspects for granted. I mean, to be able to sit at a table or go out for dinner with, 20 or 30 other, investors, realtors, brokers, you name it. There's a ton of value to that. So I think that's kind of, again, there's a few, silver linings to this whole pandemic, but one of it is, which is, realizing how important that sense of community is, surrounding yourself. Because I mean, when you're just at home all day by yourself, um, you do start to lose a little bit of that motivation.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I think that's one of the reasons why, I thought, you know what, yeah, I'll hop on this podcast here because, I've been meaning to for quite some time, but you kind of get out of that routine. I mean, I haven't been on podcasts. I haven't been on any of shows. I mean, Rav and,
Sure.
Carmen and them, I used to go on their TV shows,
I
and
remember.
I used to be very active in a lot of that stuff. And then the past year is kind of just, you start to slow down a little bit, and I want to be cautious not to slow down too much. I mean, it's good to, stop and smell the roses once in a while, but I need to continue to surround myself with like-minded people. Right. So the conversations I have with you, there's another buddy of mine that we talk every single morning on the phone. Again, he's a real hustler. He's got tons of projects, tons of deals on the go. And it's always just that little bit of a sanity check to call him and say, hey, dude, this is what I'm working on. What are you doing today? He says, well, I'm doing this, this, and that. So it's important, again, to maintain those conversations, maintain those connections.
Yeah.
More so now that we're kind of, going through, this whole social distancing phase. Don't get too distant. It would be
Yeah,
my
draw
my
closer,
advice.
right? Draw inspiration, find the balance. I think
Yeah.
you're a good example of that. Like I'll see you deke out for a month or a couple weeks for doing like fishing trips or the trips
Yeah.
that you do, and I love that you do that because it isn't all about the work, but at the same time, people can have a bad connotation of work. It saved my life a couple times from my history and whatnot too. Like my work now has kind of become my ministry because I get to interact with people, and like that's truly where I find my joy, is that one-to-one service aspect, even more so than the transactions. And I feel like I got a super hack because I get to go in everybody's house and sit down and talk to them about, different things
Yeah.
that they're going on. And, I value work. I respect people that work hard. The reason I'm in this office right now and I chose this building is because of the people that own it. The reason that you're on this podcast is because I respect your work ethic and, the work that you put into your project. So I think having people around you that you wake up and you're like, man, am I just doing am I on the hamster wheel? Like I'm doing this project and this
Mhm.
project and this project. Sometimes you got to do the work you don't want to do the work you want to do. So how does that play into your mindset in terms of just biting down on your mouthpiece and doing it?
Yeah, I mean, in the end of the day, you've got to make moves, right? You have to move forward to be able to make any changes in your life, right? So that's that is that, I could have just continued working that 9 to 5, that comfy salary, and I had some benefits, and I could have stuck with that and been really comfortable. But I knew that there was more to it. I didn't want to have to ask for, days off or beg for vacation time to go on that fishing trip, right? I wanted the ability to just, pack my stuff and think Thursday I'm going to leave and I'll be back when I'm back, right? I mean, I love that aspect. And, when I think of life, I mean, to be able to have that ability to kind of design your own life and make your own schedule, to me was worth maybe that extra work, stress, you name it, on the back end, right? I mean, you've got to put in the time. Again, whatever avenue you take, I mean, if you've got the funds and you don't have the time, I mean, you can certainly take the more passive routes too. But being as though I was young and I was pretty fresh out of university, I was of this opposite side of the spectrum where, hey, I've got the time, I've got the energy, I don't have the capital, right? So what is it that I can do to kind of continue to grow a portfolio and build up, right? So certainly a lot of sweat equity, a lot of time, thousands of hours spent just educating, right? You've got to teach yourself, you've got to network, you've got to surround yourself with people who have done it. And that's a big thing for me. And that was one of my bigger inspirations was, when I first met Scott McGilvery and I got to hear his story, it really resonated with me. He was a recent grad out of university, didn't want to work the 9 to 5, and then got into a student rental property. And then from there, it was kind of like, okay, this is scalable. I'm going to do this again. And then suddenly it turns into 4, right? So that was kind of for me, that really hit me. I wanted that. But to be able to get to that stage in life or that point where he's seen with success, I mean, doesn't come without a lot of work, a lot of stress, probably some sleepless nights. I mean, that stuff doesn't just happen overnight. So if it just like you, I mean, Justin, I know you're really into fitness, but I mean, to get kind of the end results, you've got to put in the time, you put in the work. I'm sure you already did your workout this morning. I mean, Like you have to do that stuff to be able to get whatever end result that you want.
Yeah, and that's the exact perfect answer. I was thinking about it, and you just showed up, right? You showed up, Scott showed up, and
Yeah.
you adapted though, right? Because you didn't keep doing the same thing over and over. Again, I'll share something from the fitness side of things. Is again, I do what I do because consistently I have somewhere I want to get with it, but I have a serious impingement in my left hip. I was doing something I didn't know was detrimental to that. I've been in excruciating pain, but I've still been doing my workouts because whatever, right?
Mhm.
I talked to a physio guy and he told me certain movement patterns that I shouldn't be doing. So I stopped doing them. And it's been about 2 weeks and it's like a whole different world for
Right.
me. Right. And I didn't realize I was doing something that was detrimental to my long-term journey. And it's just having somebody in my world that was nice enough and educated enough to share that with me
Mhm.
that completely changed the game. Right. So I think of you again, you share, you educate other people, you educate yourself. But the biggest hack that I ever learned in jujitsu was teaching somebody a move made me do the move better. So you
Yeah.
giving and going on Carmen's show and Rab's show and all these people that, I mean, you think about the knowledge they have and that they share, you extrapolate that down your pipeline as you share. Do you find you get better at what you do?
100%. Yeah. I mean, everything I do, everything I'm teaching and preaching is not, none of it's my own. It's, but again, it's of the mindset. Why reinvent the wheel?
Sure.
There's certain people out there that are going to say, hey, I'm going to try to just do this 100% on my own. Well, I mean, you certainly can, but it's going to be a heck of a lot. It's going to be really inefficient from a time perspective, from a money perspective. I mean, those are some expensive learning mistakes, right? So my
Lath and
perspective,
plaster.
yeah, exactly. My perspective was always, education's a great investment,
Yeah.
and it's a great way to learn without having to actually, put skin in the game and lose it potentially in a deal that doesn't make sense. It's a heck of a lot cheaper to invest in someone teaching you how to do this stuff, and then you can go and take that and make it a scalable business instead of being stubborn and wanting to learn on your own. And then there's a chance of potentially losing that money or not doing it efficiently. So then it prohibits your ability to scale,
Mhm.
right? So it's super important to invest in that education aspect, learn how to do it, and then go and implement, right? So that was kind of my focus all along was, you know what, slow down for a sec, really understand this process, surround myself with people that are doing this, don't reinvent the wheel,
Mhm.
and then do it, and then start to scale.
Yeah, the people around you become a mirror to your life, right? They
Hmm.
ask you the questions, you need to ask yourself. You say it out loud and you're like, do I actually believe that? And you look at, the advice that you're given and you start tearing it apart. Rob Velton jumped in the chat. I know he teaches Jiu-Jitsu School Academy and he's a phenomenal guy.
Right.
And it's interesting because he said like he's learned so much from teaching. Because again, if you're extrapolating a move, right, and you're saying A plus B plus C equals D, okay, well, where are there some efficiencies between A and B? Where are there some efficiencies between C and D? And, the one thing I think we've spoken about in terms of leverage in a team and getting people around you is once you have those integrators in your life, whether they be systems or a person that allows you to level up to become the visionary of what you want for your life, what you want for your projects, and execute the things as a collective, that's where you really find that freedom, right? So, I mean,
Right.
this is a nice way to wrap up this section of the interview of your journey from, yeah, I was working a 9 to 5. I saw an opportunity. I didn't overanalyze it. I kind of just put one foot in front of the other. I realized, okay, educate, refine, build that process. Oh, I've got 33 projects on the go. I feel like this has
Yeah.
become a full-time job again too. Okay, adapt, don't be afraid to look in that mirror and surround yourself with those people. So, I want to give you the platform though, before we wrap this up, to leave one message with the entire audience, be it real estate investors, people in your community, people that aren't investors, maybe looking to get into it. If you hit a billboard that would be up at an incredible summit that we have to be at this weekend, what would
Yeah.
that billboard say?
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. I think for me, and this would be too much to fit on a billboard,
For
but
sure. It's a big
um,
billboard. You can say
yeah,
whatever you
big
want.
big billboard, small font. I think the big thing is follow something that you're passionate about. I mean, even if it's not real estate, if it's you like doing some woodworking,
Yeah.
pursue that. And I know a lot of the guys that we follow and listen to in different podcasts. I mean, they're all about that. I mean, if you like to do woodworking, and if you like to make macrame something, and you want to put it on Etsy, I mean, do
Go for
something
it.
like that. I mean, you're going to figure it out, and you're not going to make big bucks right on the hop. But I think from a scalability perspective, but also from a quality of life perspective, pursue that. I mean, I talk to way too many people that, they've been in a job for 20, 30, 40 years. and they're miserable, and they're not happy with what they're doing. And then you talk to them and they're really, really excited about fishing. Well, hey, imagine if 40 years ago you pursued something in fishing. I mean, if that's something that really gets you excited and wants you to get out of bed in the morning. So I think that's it for me was, I guess I'm lucky in that, real estate is something I'm passionate in. That's what I've pursued. But that would be it, no matter what it is. If there's something that kind of excites you or something that you just can't wait to do once you're finished that, that job,
Mhm.
um, maybe just kind of shift the focus and, dip your toe in the water and see, well, is there an avenue I can go in that industry? Is there something I could do there that would be, really exciting? Because I mean, it's your life, right? If you can get to a point in time where you can design it and kind of make it the way you want, be able to have some of that work-life balance, that's going to be key. And obviously real estate's the kind of the route that I've taken that's got me there. And it's certainly from an investment perspective, it's one of the most consistent ways to do it. And it's bricks and mortar, which I love too. So, I mean, I could go on a whole other tangent about what's going on with, the markets and Reddit and Wall Street bets and all this crazy stuff too. And, I'm reading all of that, watching all that, and just thinking like, I'm so grateful and thankful that, I've put a lot of my eggs in the real estate basket because it's real. Right. So that
Yeah,
would
I
be,
kind of feel the same way too, right? Just in terms of different investing vehicles and seeing other people making money and things that I just have no interest in,
yeah.
right? It's funny. I thought of chasing those dragons a long time ago because it's like, oh, this is what everybody's doing, right? Like again, private lending, great vehicle, really good for some people, just not for me,
Yeah.
right? Just it doesn't get me out of bed. It doesn't make me excited. And I think, the overarching theme of what you've been saying is, stop asking for permission. You're
Mhm.
passionate about something, you can use your job to become a vehicle to that. If you want to stay in your job as well,
Yeah.
that's totally fine, right? Like if you love the schedule and the way that you have everything set up, I don't look at yourself and parse it out and analyze it and use people around you to help you kind of structure
Yeah.
that. So, man, I definitely appreciate you so much. And we're going to wrap up this section of the interview and go to the live Q&A. I'm going to hand this over to my girl, Lindsay. Let me just pull her back on stage and allow her to take over. So I appreciate you, brother. I'll be sitting back in the audience and watching.
Cool. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Here she comes. Lindsay's a little powerhouse now too, isn't she?
I think I got to get better lighting for this stuff. Hey, you guys look great.
Well, I mean, look where I am, right? So there's a reason I came here versus my basement, right? So yeah, it's just come join the Prime team. We always have a job opening for you.
Awesome. Hey guys. Um, hey Grant, I'm so glad that you came on today. Grant, I actually met before ever starting to invest, and my perception of Grant, so we met volunteering for Habitat for Humanity, and he was the chair of the whole build. And I remember like I did not have enough time for this. I had a day job. I had my 9 to 6. And I remember we're the same age. So I was like, how is he having all of this time to volunteer? And I would always have to ask permission to leave during work hours to go do this volunteering, which of course my boss was okay with because it's Habitat for Humanity, and it's not like I was leaving for anything for myself. But I remember thinking, how does he have all of this time? And then it kind of came full circle when I went to a real estate, Scott McGillivray Live, and realized that that's kind of how he was doing it, was real estate investing, and it kind of came full circle. So I'm really glad that you're on here, Grant, because you are definitely an inspiration for me, and we are investing in some similar markets. So it's really cool to be able to help each other too, because as we build our portfolios, we're creating stronger communities and supporting, like we provide comps for each other, and the type of work that we are providing for tenants, like your rental properties that you do are gorgeous, and it's always an inspiration for me to put a little bit of an extra touch on for my tenants as well. So we've got some questions here. First one comes from Kelly. With resale prices skyrocketing as they have been, I am looking at moving into new construction. In your experience, have you found that cost per square foot for construction, including cost of land, is actually ending up lower cost to higher cash flow for you than resale? And do you have any suggestions for stepping into new construction, i.e. finding land, finding good builders, partnering with the right folks? Oh, you're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me? That's like the term of the year, right? You're on mute. So yeah, bit of a loaded question. From my perspective, again, and unless you're a builder yourself, you've got the tools, resources, connections. Strictly from a numbers perspective, from an an investment perspective, new builds are going to cost you more money. I mean, the price of lots are expensive, the price of development charges, excavation, you name it. You start talking about input prices, which is a whole other, could be a whole other podcast, especially with what we're seeing with the pandemic. I get an email from our local, building center where lumber prices increase every month, right? I mean, we're seeing the cost of concrete, the cost of labor, the cost of insulation. I mean, every single component, especially because of, the whole pandemic and the closures that have occurred, all of your input costs just continue to go up and up and up. So, from a numbers perspective, from an input perspective, it's going to be more cost effective to buy a property that's there. You've got the lot, you've got kind of the structure, assuming it's not a total, the total tear down, and then put some money into it, where if you already have those good bones, it can be a little bit more of kind of a cosmetic mechanical build instead of the whole new build, which is it's gonna be a lot more costly. But again, it depends on what perspective you're in. I mean, if you've got a ton of capital sitting around, I know a lot of people that make a lot of money on, the whole pre-construction and development opportunities, because they can be more passive, or from like an actual building from the ground up. It can be easier. I mean, people build a new build in a fraction of the time that it takes me to redo an entire, an 1830s, or 50s Victorian home, because there's so many different quirks that we've got to kind of iron out as we're going through. So it can take more time. So I think all of that being said, super long answer to it. I prefer the renovation side of things instead of the new build. It just makes sense from a monetary perspective. You're putting in less capital. So from an investment, a return on your investment, less capital in. A lot of times from a comparable perspective is if you can take an old home but make it all new, the comps aren't that far off what you're getting in some of the new builds nowadays anyways. So run the numbers. I think that's the most important part. When I talked about that early in the show here was, put pen to paper, write it down. If your purchase price is X and then your input, your renovation is going to be Y, see what it's going to be worth and see what your return on your investment is going to be versus the new build. I don't know if I answered that at all. So.
Yeah, no, you got it. Thank you so much. Okay, next one comes from Nathan. Are your properties these days mostly on or off market? If off market, what is your strategy to find them? And then he also says he's calling you out here. He wants to see more of you on social media. He says you don't post as much as you did in the past. We missed the updates. Where have you been?
Nathan, I owe him a phone call too. So a bit of both, to be honest with you. And that's what we talk about in terms of kind of adapting, right? So in terms of sourcing, I mean, there's still some stuff that you're seeing come through that actually hit MLS. But what I'm finding is now it's so competitive, and we have so many people that have kind of eyes on our market now. Where someone from Toronto, it takes nothing for them to buy, that duplex for $450,000. Whereas in my perspective, in the same market on that same street, 2 years ago, that duplex would have been 250. So that's the important part, is you need to make sure you run the numbers and not get too excited. I mean, when a duplex is listed now, I know it's selling for 450, but you're negative, $5,000 a year cash flow. That's not a scalable business. So for me, you can't get too hyped up and excited about that stuff. I mean, it's going to sell. And as Justin mentioned, it's going to make some comps for maybe some of our other properties that are in that area, which is that good appreciation that you're going to see. But you can't get too excited about that. So I think the kind of the second route that you can take is more the off market stuff, which I mean, you guys, like your team's done a great job at it, where, you know, we get emails come in, we get those investor reports where it's saying like, hey, we have these deals, they're exclusive. I mean, that's a great in terms of, you know, finding some of these deals that aren't going to get the, you know, 40% over asking bid from some random person in, you know, an entirely different city. I mean, you can get kind of more of that local connection. So I think for me, this business it's all about relationships. I mean, it is truly who you know. And I've been able to maintain really good relationships with different realtors in different cities and different towns, where we can kind of keep that flow of deals or potential off market deals coming. And that's certainly been a game changer too. So again, it's one of those things, you got to get out there and kind of seek what it is that you're looking for, and you can't just wait for something to fall in your lap, because if you're just sitting and waiting for things to get listed on MLS, it's going to be a tough route for you, especially with how things are right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant. Next one comes from Judith. We have Grant, on average, how much are you spending per unit?
Spending as in if I'm purchasing like a turnkey, I wonder, like if I'm buying like a turnkey property, or if it's going to be like a renovation, how much per unit? I can answer.
Yeah, maybe in your multifamily, like what are your, oh, she's saying
Oh, right. Oh, Judith Wong. How are you? Reno, oh gosh, it depends. Every single project and every single property is so different, especially when, you know, for a lot of them, I mean, if you're buying a purpose-built multifamily, I mean, there's times where we can get away with, you know, 5 to 10,000 per unit turnover, and that's going to be floors, paint, you know, some new cabinetry and a few things like that, some updated lights, where structurally you're not really having to do anything. So it can be more cosmetic. So I mean, you could, if you wanted to do it yourself and get real bare bones, I mean, you're talking $2,500 to $5,000. Whereas a lot of the projects that we do is more so the conversion stuff, where, you know, we're buying these old Victorian homes. We're talking the 3,000 and 4,000 square foot homes that, I mean, a lot of people aren't living in nowadays. It's a lot of unnecessary space. People aren't having as big of families. And it just makes more sense, especially because typically they're centralized in like a downtown core. It makes more sense to intensify those. So that's been kind of one of our main strategies is, you know, buying these old homes, and then what we're doing is actually chopping them up tastefully into some smaller apartments, which just make a lot more sense. So obviously with those ones, it's a heck of a lot more than 5 or 10,000 a unit, because it's a lot of restructuring, all new mechanicals, new plumbing, new electrical, you name it. So I mean, those ones there can be, you know, 50 to 100 to 200, you never know, right? So every project's different.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so from Nathan again, with the volume of work that you take on, how deep do you get into the renovation numbers? If you know it's going to be a gut, do you have a number that you arbitrarily use per unit, knowing that historically that's what they've cost in the past?
Yeah, we have ballpark numbers based on previous projects. So I've got kind of an estimated number. Well, if we're doing a fourplex, this is what it's going to cost for electrical. If this is what it's going to be, I mean, every project's also going to have its quirks, where there's going to be some unexpecteds that pop up. But yeah, it's been a bit of a process in terms of, you know, we get our estimates, we get our quotes, and then we always have kind of a second column where here's what our actual cost is, because there's always those unexpecteds. And then as you continue to do more projects, you can kind of add on to that, some of that sheet. So it's a little bit of that, but it's also been very difficult with some of the unexpected price increases that we've got going on right now. You know, with the pandemic, with a lot of the closures, I mean, now we're starting to see that ripple effect from when things in factories were closed back in, you know, the summer, where, I mean, if you want to go buy a Whirlpool or Frigidaire fridge, those things are back ordered for the next, you know, 4 months. You name it, right? And I mentioned that earlier in terms of the costs of lumber. So a project that, you know, we started back in October, you know, it was a full gut, and we've ended up taking a lot of the building out. Well, now it's time to order a lot of the lumber, and the price from when we first did the numbers back in June to what it is now when we're actually ordering, I mean, no one would have ever been able to kind of estimate or predict a lot of those, right? So there's some stuff where it's just, you shrug the shoulders a bit and say, well, hey, it's the times we're in, and it's the renovation industry, and stuff happens. But that's, again, when we talk about running the numbers, you want to make sure you're super conservative, right? Because if a 10%, another 20 or 15% increase on, your lumber costs, you can't let that make or break the project, right? So you need to make sure that when you're running the numbers, you're conservative, and that you've got enough cushion in there at the end of the day, that if there's a 10% increase on lumber input, then, I mean, it sucks, but you're not going to lose your shirt over it. And that's the most important part.
Awesome. Got a question from Elaine here. Can Grant please repeat how your primary is not an asset? I've had that aha moment also, and realized the potential of what I can do with the equity. We have the opportunity to live for free with family and put money to work and continue to grow our portfolio portfolio as a BRRRR flip to JV strategy. We currently have 3 income properties.
Yeah. So basically, in a nutshell, I mean, from an investment perspective, what we're looking for is the final number is going to be what is our return on our investment. So you can run those numbers on an income property, and your return, you're going to have all of your income coming in, and then you're going to deduct all of your expenses, and then you're stuck with, well, what's our return on investment? Well, it's going to be, our NOI divided by basically how much capital we've got tied up, which is essentially going to be your down payment, your, if you put in some renovations, you name it, that's going to be your number. But if you go and run the numbers in the same way on your principal residence, what you're going to see is you're going to have a negative return on investment. And again, that's just from a conservative standpoint. I mean, I know some of you have probably seen a 20% increase on appreciation, which is fantastic. But again, we can't bank on it. If you just look from a bank statement perspective, how much does that property create or generate for you on a monthly basis? And then how much are you actually out of pocket for that place? Right? So your principal residence, you're paying your property taxes, you're paying your utilities, you're paying your insurance, you're paying a mortgage. Most of you are going to be paying a mortgage, right? So here, that's all out of pocket expense. And then from an income perspective, well, you're not making or generating any income. The only way you're creating income on that property is the actual appreciation, which is going to be kind of that passive appreciation on it, right? Now, again, there's so many different tangents we can go down, because if you're a renovator and you're living in a home and you're renovating it, you are adding some active appreciation, which is fantastic. But I'm just going to say, for the majority of the population, you've got a lot of money tied up in an asset that you're continuing to pay out of pocket for every single month. So I'm not saying don't go buy property. I'm saying, with the amount of equity that you have tied up in that home, if you were to liquidate, hypothetically speaking, I'm not telling you to go, I'll sell your homes, but if you were to free up that capital, which could be a way of, home equity line of credit, and actually put that into an income producing asset, which is going to be, let's call it a rental property, you're going to get a higher return on investment on that versus your own home. So that's kind of the perspective that we take from an investment perspective. Is if we're looking at 3 different properties and we run the numbers on each one, you're going to want to acquire the one that's going to create the highest ROI, right? So that's essentially how it is your home costs you money every single month. You've got a lot of money tied up, which most of it is just dormant capital, right? You've got equity, and it's kind of the traditional way of thinking or teachings that, go to school, get a job, buy a home, pay it off. And again, that's kind of been ingrained in us for, many generations now. But at the end of the day, it's, well, what's all the hype about paying it off, right? There's no party at the end of it where you get to celebrate. I mean, you've paid it off, and now you've got all this equity literally sitting in your home doing nothing, right? Either way, your home's appreciating. So that's where we're of the perspective of, well, leverage isn't a bad thing. Leverage is actually a great thing from a scalability perspective, because with that equity you have sitting in your home, if you can now go and take that and purchase, 2 or 3 other income producing assets that are going to generate cash flow every single month, that's going to get you a hell of a lot better on than just having money sit dormant in your own home.
Definitely. I love that. I've definitely changed my parents' mindset on that as well. So that's great advice. Next question from Diana. Does Grant partner JV with little old real estate investors like us watching, or is he inclusive to his own business?
No, I mean, I'm always up for different partnerships. And I mean, that's a little bit of what we talked about before is, working with other people. I mean, for me, it's fun. Um, and I like that social aspect, but I always love bringing a kind of a win-win situation to the table. Right. So we work with investors all the time. And they don't have to be big savvy investors. Some of them have been people that are, kind of getting their foot wet and they're not sure. Maybe it's their first flip or, whatever it might be. There's always kind of a win-win situation to be had there. So.
Awesome. Last question from Joseph. At your level now, what do you call leveling up? Is there something you want to take on that you're excited to learn about, both because you like it and because it's going to help your business?
Hmm. It's, you know what, it's funny because, I think the traditional mindset, and a lot of us kind of get caught up in that, and in terms of leveling up, that you've always got to do something that's bigger, better, higher, capital requirement, you name it. I mean, a lot of people kind of get caught up in that. I mean, I think from a traditional perspective, my leveling up would be, well, now it's time to do like a small development, right? Let's buy a lot or land and do a whole bunch of builds. Um, but truth be told, I think my next kind of phase of leveling up is, how do I generate even more of that work-life balance that I got into this industry for? I found myself over the past several years where you're busy, you're tied down, you've got a lot of commitments on the go. You start to put off some of that stuff that you'll really genuinely love to do, the fishing on the weekends, the going boating on a Tuesday night, when things like that, where you got into this industry because you want some of that freedom and flexibility, and then you start to get so busy that you put that stuff on the side. So I think for me, the leveling up is more so, how do I scale this without getting myself really tied down, from a time perspective, from an emotional or an energy perspective. How do you kind of free this up, keep the train kind of moving forward, but not be, answering the phone every 5 minutes, dealing with emails, calling with banks and brokers and you name it. Right. So it's different perspectives, but I think the pandemics, again, from a silver lining perspective, is really shown the importance of family and friends and time to be able to spend with those people. So once all of this stuff is done and lifted, I think that's kind of the focus I want to be able to do, was more of, is not having Grant's always busy, he's got a lot of projects on the go, but hey, heck yeah, I'll go camping with you guys, right? So I want to do that.
Me too. I popped my video back on because I'm like, it's funny that's actually an overarching conversation we're having at Prime right now. How do you, do more business and grow? Not necessarily just volume wise, but like, how do you continue to grow but feel less busy? Right. Yeah. And going back to what I said earlier, it's having an integrator and having a plan in terms of what your calendar looks like and sticking to it. And, like the next 3 days are a gong show for us. My wife and daughter understand that. I spent last weekend with them. Right. So I'll work with you on that, brother. I have some insights that I'm learning from people that are smarter than me that I'll be happy to share with you. Lindsay, you are a wonderful soul. Thank you so much for running through the Q&A. Grant, I want to honor your time on this beautiful Saturday, and thanks for making time for us, brother.
Awesome. Hey, thanks so much to both of you. Really appreciate it.
No, you're a good dude, man. I'm sure we'll cross paths soon and see you when all this craziness is over. Thanks for all the attendees. You guys were wonderful, and thank you for all the good questions.
Yeah, good. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
All right. See ya. Take care.
See you guys.